Good evening and welcome to Centerpoint. I'm Lindsay Keith. Thanks for joining us this evening. We begin tonight with the kind of headline that should rattle everyone in the country. Federal deficit unexpectedly set to double this year. And federal means you, the taxpayer. One way or the other, that debt is on us. And this headline comes as Congress must approve a series of spending bills by September 30th in order to keep the government funded. And several House conservatives are threatening to let the government shut down unless significant spending cuts are made. One of these members of Congress is Virginia's Bob Good, a member of the House Budget Committee, and Congressman Good joins us now. Congressman, welcome to the show.
Be with you, Lindsay.
Okay, so you have said that, quote, we should not fear a government shutdown, and that 85% of the government will continue to run, and most Americans won't even notice a thing. So you're saying that only 15% of the government is going to be affected by a potential shutdown?
Yes, everything that's considered, quote, essential does continue. There's very little impact on individual Americans. But most importantly, we are running, as you noted, about $150 billion a month deficit for a total of about $2 trillion, in part because of the omnibus spending bill that was passed last December, sadly, with 17 Republicans in the Senate joining all Democrats in the House and the Senate to pass it, which took away our ability to easily cut spending this year. We should have used the debt ceiling agreement as leverage to cut spending. We failed to do that. We ought to be using the appropriations process to cut spending. We must do that. We must implement Republican priorities and cut our spending as we committed to the American people to do when we were running last year and they gave us the majority.
So you have Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. He's on the opposite side of you. He is more for continuing a resolution, which I want to talk to you about in a minute. But he says this, quote, if we shut down, all the government shuts down and investigations shut down, everything else, it hurts the American public. Are you okay if these investigations into the Biden administration and alleged corruption and scandal are shut down as well?
Well, we have 222 Republicans in the House. We only need 218 to pass our spending bills. Those spending bills should implement conservative Republican priorities, reverse the policies that are destroying the country under the previous Biden, Pelosi, Schumer regime. Those policies are still in place, and we ought to go back to pre-COVID level spending, which is what we committed to together back in January when the speaker was voted in, and also in the Limit Save Grow bill that virtually all Republicans voted for back in April. So if we pass our spending bills and send them to the Senate, then we are effectively keeping the government open unless the Senate refuses to pass those bills. Democrats in the Senate don't have 60 votes. They have to have Republican votes to pass anything in the Senate, so they ought to be passing Republican bills that reflect the House. That said, there is no truth to the fact that we can't continue investigations just because the government shuts down, quote unquote, shuts down. The speaker gets to decide what's essential operations in the House. The only way those investigations would stop if the speaker directed them to stop. That's simply just not true, that we can't continue those operations if there was a, quote, government shutdown.
Okay, so let's talk about this, because last week the White House asked Congress, you all, to pass a single short-term measure called a continuing resolution, as you know, a CR, to keep the government open so you guys can continue to essentially have these negotiations about longer-term spending. It sounds like a great idea, but you were on the Freedom Caucus and you all put forth a list of demands and saying, if you meet these demands, then we will sign this continuing resolution. I want to read some of those for our audience. Crackdowns on undocumented immigrants, restart the construction of the border wall, and a vote on an impeachment inquiry into President Biden. Does Speaker Kevin McCarthy support your list of demands?
Well, I would think that all Republicans would support securing the border, continuing the investigation into President Biden. There's growing evidence that he has been guilty of corruption, influence peddling, and even bribery. And impeachment inquiry just expands the ability to investigate that with virtually unlimited power to do so. But most importantly, we as Republicans should be cutting our spending. We ran on cutting our spending. The nation cannot afford it. It's the most important responsibility the House has, is the power of the purse. So we need to implement conservative policies that we ran on, and we need to cut our spending, put us on a path towards fiscal responsibility. We cannot betray the trust the American people placed in us when they gave us the majority. The problem in Washington is the uniparty that comes together and does what they've always done. That's what January speaker battle was about, that we wouldn't let the American people down by, passing, when we have Republican majorities, passing spending bills with Democrat votes that keep Democrat priorities in place. That is simply a failure on the part of Republicans historically, and we can't do it this Congress.
All right, we'll have to check back in with you when you all return to the House next week. Good to see you, Congressman. Good.
Thank you, Lindsay.